If you've had your head under a rock for the last 12 months, Brisbane and southeast Queensland are now going through the fastest migration rates or population growth rates that we've seen up here for the last 10 to 12 years. And there's a number of reasons in today's video which will explain exactly why that's happening. It's not just because of the jobs, the lifestyle, the infrastructure, the income growth occurring up here at the moment, but it is just also because these people are being forced out of Sydney and Melbourne, cashing out of expensive houses down there or moving out of expensive rentals down there and moving up here, as the income in particular has radically increased recently. So in today's video, Simon and I are going to talk through each of the things that are occurring from a numbers or a statistics perspective up here right now. Let's kick it off, Simon.
So one of the major ones that I found just absolutely insane is there's between 1,000 and 1,300 people moving into southeast Queensland every single week at the moment, which is just insane. Like, that's some of the strongest migration in Australia at the moment.
And it's funny because when I moved up here for the very first time, I've bounced between here and Sydney a bunch, but when I moved up here for the first time, I think it was in 2006. Yeah, 2006, there was at that time about 1,000 people moving into southeast Queensland per week, and I suppose that was the last time we felt meaningful capital growth as a result of that extra demand for rental properties, as a result of the extra demand for housing and supply and demand not really balancing up. The difference that time is there was enough properties for everybody to buy. This time it's chronically undersupplied in everywhere but Brisbane in a CBD right now, so it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, there's a need for that population growth.
So tell everyone about the article that the Macquarie Bank just released on the ABC's website.
This is one of the most amazing things that came across our desks a little while ago now, a couple of months ago actually, but Macquarie Bank actually predicts that 140,000 homeowners from other parts in Australia are going to sell up the equity that they've recently received and move into the southeast Queensland market. And what they're predicting from those 140,000 homeowners is an $8.2 billion wealth transfer over the next 2 to 3 years.
Which represents about 25% of the size of the current southeast Queensland marketplace or property marketplace in any given year. So it is a huge amount of extra demand that may or may not occur. Like, just because Macquarie Bank's saying that stuff or we're regurgitating their information doesn't mean that it's a given, but there is some severe housing stress in terms of prices on a lot of families down there in Sydney at the moment. I was in an Uber actually the other day with a bloke in Sydney. I was down there to catch up with some of the guys at the Entourage, and the Entourage is like a business coaching business that a friend of mine works in, and we were going out for dinner, and I was going from the airport to dinner. Don't know why I had to tell everyone all that shit. But the guy was saying that he was basically keeping his head above board. He was earning $100,000 in his daytime job. He was driving Uber 6 nights a week, and his wife was working. They only had one child, and he was just keeping his head above water. He couldn't save any money during the week, and I was like, that is freaking insane. Like, $100,000 in Queensland buys you this, like, a home on the water. It enables, you know, not 100k, but that type of combined income that he had in his family, which is about 150 per year. It gives you all sorts of opportunities from a schooling perspective, and it makes sense that people that are just breaking even down there are starting to think strategically about either cashing out of a home that they own that they've got great equity in and paying off debt and ending up with a huge amount of money in the bank, or just moving over the border because lifestyle wise, job wise and income wise it makes a lot of sense right now.
Exactly, and when you can get a home on the water like this at the moment, and it only costs you $1 million, you know, you can sell up your property down in Sydney that's in the suburbs 25-30 k's from the CBD and come up and have that amazing luxury lifestyle.
Yeah, or don't do that and just buy yourself a nice easy 600k home walking distance to the beaches, or a home within 10 k's of the city for 550 grand, or a home 20 k's from the city for 400k, and pocket all of the rest of the cash and invest in your future, or just keep it as cash for a rainy day, or, you know, go on a trip for a year, whatever you want to do. You know, this choices is one of the great things that people that have made really strong equity in the last few years have now.
And we can actually see this is currently happening because southeast Queensland currently has the strongest interstate migration in Australia. So we're not just telling people are actually doing this at the moment. So there's more people in Australia that are selling up, moving into southeast Queensland than anywhere else in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, and that's interesting because Melbourne's held that torch for a long time now. I think between 2012 and 2017 or mid-17, more people were moving into Melbourne than any other place. Now southeast Queensland, between the Gold Coast, Brisbane and Sunshine Coast, has taken that over, and now there's more Aussies moving here than anywhere else. So, you know, it's natural for that to happen after we go through a huge price surge. About once every 15 years or so, you see this mass migration north, and it starts very slowly, but over time more people jump on the bandwagon. I think I've had emails from 5 of my clients over the last 12 months that have gone, I'm finally doing it, Ben, I'm finally moving up here. And you know, that works out differently for different people, but as long as you can come up here and get a good job and set your family up or set yourselves up, it's, you know, something that Simon and I have both done and really happy that we've done as well.
Definitely, and you can see it's always ebbed and flowed with people moving into the southeast Queensland market, but then you have people like Michael Matusik coming out and saying that he predicts that 25% of the entire Australian population growth and job growth is actually going to occur up here over the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, so it's not just Michael Matusik saying that. The Australian Bureau of Statistics forecasts that 25% of Australia's population growth will be here, 25% in Sydney, 25% in Melbourne. Now, as an investor, they are your 3 best marketplaces in Australia. If you look at your history, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane have all, over the last 20 years and the last 50 years, outperformed any other market in Australia. In the last 20 years, all of them have grown by over 8.5% a year, which I don't think is going to happen over the next 20. That's exceptional. And over the last 50 years, they've all grown by an average of over 9.5% per year. So long term, it looks great. Don't let the recency bias of Sydney and Melbourne doing so well in the very, very short term, last 5 years, impact your ability to also see value in other marketplaces now that they're starting to decline. And I believe we'll sit flat for quite a period of time until people can start affording them again.
Exactly. Timing is such an important thing when you're thinking about investing in other markets.
100%. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics has also come out with its population projection numbers and said that they reckon about 5 million people will end up living in Brisbane within about 30 years from today. So that means that Brisbane will get to the current size that Sydney is right now, that Melbourne is right now. And if you just think about 20 years ago or 15 years ago, when Sydney and Melbourne were the size of Brisbane right now, 2.3 to 2.5 million people, and how different they feel now in terms of so much more going on. Brisbane is heading in that same direction. The difference is Brisbane is a lot more landlocked than those areas, so the density is going to go up, particularly in the CBD.
Exactly, and there's a lot of infrastructure projects that are occurring around the Brisbane CBD and surrounding Brisbane suburbs at the moment to support that long-term population growth. Now, population growth is one thing. Obviously, it's nice to say that an area is growing in population, but job growth and income growth are equally or more important to me personally, because as an investor, I don't want 100,000 people moving over the border every year that are going to work in cafes and not being able to contribute to the economy in a meaningful way. What I want is high-paying jobs. So let's talk about what's going on income-wise in Brisbane right now as opposed to Melbourne and Sydney. So it's a combination of a lot of different workers coming into the marketplace up here at the moment, but it's said that the average household income in Brisbane is actually 0.7% higher than Melbourne at the moment, which just blew my mind when I found out. Yeah, so that means that people in Brisbane, the average household is now earning more than the average household income in Melbourne, but the prices in Melbourne, did you say, are 47% higher? 45% higher than Brisbane at the moment, according to RP data. So if you've got people earning the same money and prices are that much more expensive down there in Melbourne, that's at least interesting to consider. And the reason incomes are increasing in Brisbane right now is there is a very, very strong amount of infrastructure going in. There's also some very strong developments going in. Mining is starting to kick off in certain areas as well, with some of those big mining companies that hold their head offices in Brisbane really starting to ramp up the operational sides of their businesses again. So interesting. Yeah, so all of these things are amazing for the southeast Queensland market, and it's actually the fastest population growth that southeast Queensland has seen in the last 10 to 12 years according to the ABS.
Yeah, and you know, as I said, I moved up here last time in the last, you know, sort of mass migration north, if you want to call it that.
I've moved up in this one.
Yeah, and it's sort of one of those things. It's just a natural part of the cycle. It gets too expensive to live down there, or the lifestyle gets too congested, or opportunities job-wise come up here. People come over the border. Some of those people stay, like Simon and I. Some of them go home, but most of them contribute to the economy, whether they're here short-term or long-term. So it's not just migration, it's not just jobs being created at the moment, it's not just infrastructure, it's not just new projects, but it is income as well, which is fantastic. And so I think the combination of those things occurring up here, you know, can't be a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that prices are going to go running off into the sunset like they have in Sydney and Melbourne. I think it's going to be a much slower burn, but over time, supply and demand meet each other, and over time demand outweighs supply if people keep doing this. And you know, that is a good thing for cash flow on properties from a rent perspective. It's a great thing for owner-occupiers that live in these areas that also get great capital growth. And you know, if you're an investor like Simon and I, then it can also be great from a capital growth perspective. We see the next 7 years being really positive, as do some of the forecasters that we follow, like Heron Todd Wyatt, like BIS Shrapnel, like CoreLogic. So get your head around this marketplace.
If you want to start to learn to wrap your head around a little bit more.
See that?
I hope
huge fish just jumped out.
If you wanted to start wrapping your head a little bit more around Brisbane, not just the population figures, but all the other interesting things that are happening up here, we'd love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session to discuss this. If you'd like, go to www.pumpedonproperty/strategy session and you can book a time that suits yourself for that one.
Yeah, so we'd love to talk about where you are, where you're looking to go in the future, educate you a bit more on this Southeast Queensland market that we're so excited about, and just really appreciate your time and attention today. So thank you very much, guys, and have a great day.